Do you ever heard about the country of Rwanda? I bet many of you haven't heard about the country. Or if you do, it must have been by the famous genocide in 1994. But how this problem exactly resurfaced, or how this problem exactly happened in the first place, well, we're about to find out. Until the start of the 20th century, Belgium possessed the colony of Rwanda-Urundi until the distant years after the Second World War. But later, series of nationalisms sparked around the African continent and forced British and French Empire would eventually lose their colonies in Africa after a significant run of bloodbaths in their attempt to stop the natives from attacking their European rulers. Belgium itself tried to prevent any violence from happening in the increasing demand of independence of their colony in Congo and Rwanda-Urundi. Belgium later gave an autonomy and eventually independence to all of their colonies in Africa. Congo became Zaire, and Rwanda-Urundi separated to form two countries of Rwanda and Burundi. When Belgium eventually gave Rwanda an independence, they would later make a fatal mistake by appointing a Tutsi to lead the country. Tutsis are the minority and less superior in number compared to the Hutus. We can easily define who's Tutsi and who's Hutu by their skin color. People with Tutsi ethnicity have lighter skin color than the Hutus. Enraged by the appointment of Tutsi to lead the country, the Hutus immediately started a civil war in 1962, which will eventually overthrow the Tutsi leader to be led by Hutu President Gregoire Kayibanda. During his rule in Rwanda, there was an ongoing anti-Tutsi sentiment and racialism. Persecution against the Tutsi are very common. In effect, many Tutsis would start to seek for refuge in the neighboring Uganda. The Ugandans are welcoming the Tutsis, and some of them would later join the Ugandan army. Gregoire Kayibanda would soon be overthrown in a staged coup d'état by Juvenal Habyarimana in 1973. During Habyarimana's reign, the anti-Tutsi sentiment was still up and running. Although Habyarimana made Rwandan economy to rapidly grow and maybe improved the severe living condition suffered by most of the population. His dictatorship is similar like King Louis XVI of France. Habyarimana's reign was often dictated by his wife, widely known as Akuza. The intervention of Akuza in Habyarimana's domestic policy angered some Hutu extremists and started to demand him to leave his position. Distracted by their internal problem, Rwanda and their Hutu paramilitary wing, the Interahamwe, didn't realize that the Tutsis has already formed the RPF, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, in the border of Uganda. Later on, Interahamwe and RPF would be clashing, and this will result into an annihilation of the Tutsi population in Rwanda. RPF's leader is the young Paul Kagame. Kagame urged all of the Tutsis in the Ugandan army to help them taking over the country from the Hutus. In one decisive night in mid-1990, RPF crossed the border from northern Rwanda and dressed as the Ugandan army. This sparked a confusion between Uganda and Rwanda because both of their presidents were in New York to attend a UNICEF event. Later, they found out that the perpetrator was RPF and proclaimed that the Second Civil War has started. RPF under Paul Kagame gained little advantage and suffering a stalemate in the northern Rwanda. The civil war would stuck on the situation until 1994 when it reached the boiling point. President Juvenal Habyarimana was about to land on the Kigali airport when an anti-aircraft shell suddenly blows up the plane, killing both him and President Cyprien Ntaryamana of Burundi instantly. The attack causes a panic around the area and caused propagandas to be spread blaming the Tutsis to be behind this attack. And later, Interahamwe leader George Rutaganda gave his provocative speech that can even be regarded as a live propaganda. The speech that sparked the Rwandan genocide by saying that
when people ask me, good listeners, why do I hate all the Tutsi? I say, read our history. The Tutsi were collaborators for the Belgian colonists. They stole our Hutu land. They whipped us. Now they have come back, these Tutsi rebels. They are cockroaches. They are murderers. Rwanda is our Hutu land. We are the majority. They are a minority of traitors and invaders. We will squash their infestation. We will wipe out the RPF rebels. This is RTLM Hutu Power Radio. Stay alert. Watch your neighbors.
Instantly sparked the hatred towards the Tutsis even further, and later also known that George Rutaganda had already prepared for such massacre by importing 300,000 pieces of new Chinese machetes that were later used to slaughter the Tutsis. Within hours, the genocide started. Soldiers, police, militias, and even civilians began by killing key Tutsi figures and moderate Hutu politicians. The bizarre euphoria spread very quickly throughout the country. UN reacted by sending more UNAMIR troops that were stationed in Rwanda since the civil war began and tried to escort Prime Minister Uwilingiyimana with 15 Belgian UNAMIR troops, but they got caught in the way to the airport by the Hutus. The Prime Minister was almost immediately killed and the Belgian UNAMIR troops were tortured to death. The success of killing the Belgian peacekeepers motivated the Hutus even more and led to a mass massacre. Even when they just saw a civilian who's not as black as the Hutus, they will instantly kill that person in the most gruesome of ways. The slaughterers just didn't care on whom they killed. May it be men, women, or children. Any Tutsi they saw would be slashed by a machete instantly. The UNAMIR who's tasked to defend the Tutsis are almost helpless and eventually stationed in Mille de Collines Hotel to protect 800 Tutsis and Paul Rusesabagina, who would later be filmed with the title Hotel Rwanda. Dead bodies lying everywhere on the streets. In the short span of 100 days, Interahamwe successfully killed 800 ethnic Tutsis. Later, it was found out that the assassin of President Habyarimana was the Hutu extremist himself, who had fed up with the dictatorship of Habyarimana's reign in the country. And at the same time, this Hutu extremist wants to have license on doing an ethnic cleansing on the Tutsis by blaming the death of Habyarimana to them. Back to the situation of the Civil War. RPF increased their intensity of attacks since the death of juvenile Habyarimana and increased tenfold when the news of genocide to the Tutsis arrived. RPF is now highly motivated and distracted Interahamwe who's allocating their mind and resource to the genocide. RPF caught the Interahamwe off guard and capitalized on their situation and starts to advance further into Rwanda, taking a city by city, while Interahamwe was just out there killing innocent Tutsis. Finally, by 15th of July 1994, the capital city of Kigali is taken over by Paul Kagame and RPF. With the fall of Kigali to the hands of RPF, the genocide subsequently ended, and Paul Kagame is appointed as the new president of Rwanda. The remaining Interahamwes fled to Zaire, Congo. Paul Kagame wanted to seek revenge on the Interahamwes and continuing the war simultaneously on the remaining Interahamwes and Zaire. They would eventually win and overthrow Zaire's dictator Mobutu Sese Seko, who had been the supreme leader for almost 20 years. Rwanda has never looked back ever since. Post-genocide Rwanda is currently one of the fastest growing economy in Africa, and suddenly became one of the role model countries in Africa. This successful economic rebuild is often regarded as the Rwandan economic miracle, with Paul Kagame still in charge today. While Rwandan genocide has already passed many years ago, there is an ongoing genocide or ethnic cleansing attempt by Myanmar's army on the ethnic Rohingya, the minority in the country. It was started in 2012 when a Rakhine woman was gang raped by Rohingya Muslims, which erupted the situation into a full-scale riot in the Rakhine state and making it to a state of emergency. 88 civilians were killed after the Myanmar's military intervened to administrate the security in the region. A further 2,528 houses were burned and over 90,000 Rohingya civilians were displaced in effect to the violence. International world condemned the situation and addressed that the reaction made by military was overdone and not necessary. Many Rohingya settlers never been able to go back to their houses, and this resulted to a mass refugee wave in all of Southeast Asia, which many of them would die either from starvation, drowning, or disease. They are denied citizenship by the Myanmar's government, even excluded from the 2014 census, with the reason that Rohingyans aren't Myanmaris but instead immigrants from Bangladesh. The military even rumored to rape a woman and child in the process of exclusion. Aung San Suu Kyi, the former human rights figure, is under heavy pressure of conducting genocide, which contradicts her actions years earlier. She rejected any allegations of genocide when she appeared in the court in Den Haag, December 2019. The effect is that approximately 700,000 Rohingya civilians are now dislocated away from their burned homes, with many suffering trauma of the cruel action by the Myanmar's military when they got expelled. Now, without any citizenship, they have nowhere to go. If this Rohingya crisis is compared to Rwandan genocide, we can see some similarities. First, there is an attempt to do an ethnic cleansing on a minority done in a forceful way. Second, killings take place in both of the genocide attempts, despite Rohingya crisis appears to be more lenient than Rwandan genocide, mainly because international world condemning Myanmar right from the start. Unlike Rwandan genocide, which even after hearing the news about the genocide that happened, international world chose not to intervene, resulted in the death of 900,000 civilians, mostly Tutsis, in Rwanda.